So far we've seen how to create and update the values in our arrays, but there are some methods and properties that allow us to do some other interesting things on our arrays. Let's check out a few of them. So we've seen the basic way of creating an array, and the way we can read and write into different indices of that array. But there are also some nice methods that we can use to do some very specific tasks to our array that we'll want to use very often. The first pair of methods we're going to look at are called push and pop. Push and pop go together in that they do sort of the opposite of each other in a very useful way. So let's create my array, and we'll set it equal to, let's say, the number 2, the number 3, and the number 4. Just 3 different numbers right here. So first we're going to look at the method called push. We can think of push as pushing a value onto the end of our array. This is a lot like how we did myArray with the index of myArray.length equals some new value. It'll append the new value to the end of our array. So we're going to do a console.log, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take myArray.toString. And the reason I'm doing this, we'll see in a moment, but right now the toString is just a method that will take a representation of our array and turn it into a string, which console.log will now show us. So by using this push method, let's say we want to put the value 5 at the end or the right hand side of our array. So we can do myArray, and we'll use .push, and then now we pass in the value we want to add, which is 5. And then I'm going to copy this console.log myArray.toString line to the bottom here. So if we refresh our page, we can see that the first time it printed out 2, 3, and 4, and then after we did our push, the values were 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's very easy to see by calling .push, we're able to add another element to the end of our array, or to the right-hand side of our array. Now, an interesting thing as to why I had to do myArray.toString is because the way that the console.log will work is, since both of these actions happen so close to each other, if we take off the toString, we're really just telling it to print out the value of myArray. However, it happens slightly after our code is run. So when we take a look at this, we can see that the values that the console printed out both look the same because that's how it looked at the end of this script execution. Now, in reality, at line 36 here, the myArray only contained 2, 3, and 4. And then at the end of our script, it contained 2, 3, 4, and 5. However, just as a quirk to how console.log worked, it actually showed us the value as it ended, which was 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to just use toString there, which will make sure that we get the value in a string at this line right here, 35. When we call toString, it definitely only has 2, 3, and 4. So let's move on to pop. So if we take myArray.pop, and this doesn't take any arguments, instead it returns a value. So let's say var value equals myArray.pop. Now what does pop return? Well, pop returns the last value of our array. Since we pushed the value 5 to the end of our array, when we pop, it should return the value 5. But besides just returning the last value of our array, it actually removes or pops it off the array. Meaning that after line 40, if we take a look at console.log myArray.toString, we should now see the values 2, 3, and 4. So if we refresh, we can see that push added a value to the right-hand side. It pushed the value 5 onto our array, and pop took it off. And if we inspect the variable value, we can see that it's 5, which was the last value in our array when we called pop. We can continue to pop, and we'll do var value 2 equals myArray.pop. And we can see that it will continue to pop values off of the array. So now at the end, we're down to just the values 2 and 3. If we take a look at value 2, we can see it's the value 4 that we popped off the second time. So I'm going to comment this out, and we'll take a look at 2 other methods that are very similar to push and pop, which are unshift and shift. And unshift and shift are a lot like push and pop, in that they remove or add an element to one end of the list. The difference is where push and pop move things from the right-hand side or the end of the list, unshift and shift will operate on the beginning of the list. Let's take a look. Let's create an array called myArray, and we'll set its values to 2, 3, and 4. So we'll do a console.log of myArray.toString so we can see what its value is in the beginning. And let's take a look at our first method, unshift. Unshift is analogous to the push method, except that instead of adding it to the end of the array, it'll add our element to the beginning. So the syntax is the same. We'll do myArray.unshift instead of push, and then we pass it the element that we want to add to the beginning of our list. Let's say we want to add the element number 1. If we do another console.log after our unshift operation, we can see how the myArray values have changed. So let's go back to the browser and refresh, and we can see the original values being 2, 3, and 4. And after we call unshift with the value 1, we can see that 1 has been added to the beginning, and all the other elements have moved right 1 index position. So now we have the values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Similar to unshift, there is a shift method which works a lot like pop. So shift returns the value that's the first element of the array, and then it removes that element and moves everything back 1 position in the index. So we can store it into a variable called myValue, and we can set it equal to myArray.shift. And again, this doesn't take any parameters because it's simply removing a value and returning it, not adding a value in. So we can add one more console.log to see the values of the array. And if we go back and refresh, we can see that we have 2, 3, 4. We did the unshift with the value 1, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after we called shift, we have 2, 3, and 4 again because the 1 has been removed. Also, the value from the beginning of the array when we called shift is stored into a variable called value, and we can see it's 1. So unshift and shift are pretty easy to understand, especially once you understand push and pop. The only confusing part is which one does which. With push and pop, you can kind of think of it as pushing an element into the array or popping one out of the array, but shift and unshift aren't so easy to remember, at least for me. The way I like to remember it is unshift and push are similar, and shift and pop are also similar. But the way I remember which one is similar to which is unshift and push, which are similar, both have the letter U, while the other ones don't. So the ones with the U are the ones like push, and the other ones are not. So shift removes an element, and unshift adds an element like push.